Today, we will take a look at Existential Psychology by Rollo May. Existential psychology started shortly after World War II, starting from Europe to the United States. It is rooted in the philosophy of men like Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Søren Kierkegaard, among others. Søren Kierkegaard is a Danish philosopher and theologian. He greatly influenced modern existential psychology as we know it today. Kierkegaard questioned the following. First, man being seen merely as objects, and second, that subjective perceptions as one's only reality. Kierkegaard focused on both the experiencing person and the person's experience. Kierkegaard wished to understand people as they exist in the world, as thinking, active, and willing beings. He emphasized the balance between freedom and responsibility. People acquire freedom of action through expanding their self-awareness and then assuming responsibility for their actions. The acquisition of freedom and responsibility, however, is only achieved at the expense of anxiety. And as people realize that, ultimately, they are in charge of their own destiny, they experience the burden of freedom and the pain of responsibility. Coming from this background, how do we now define existential psychology? According to the American Psychological Association, existential psychology is a psychological theory derived from existentialism that emphasizes the subjective meaning of human experience, the uniqueness of the individual, and personal responsibility reflected in choice. Prior to this definition, psychologists interpret existentialism in a variety of ways, but some common elements can be found among existential thinkers. First, existence takes precedence over essence. Second, existentialism opposes the split between subject and object. Third, existentialists hold that ultimately each of us is responsible for who we are and what we become. And people search for some meaning in their lives. Now, let's talk about existence over essence. Existence is focused on growth and change, while essence signifies stagnation and finality. Western civilization has traditionally valued essence over existence. It has sought to understand the essential composition of things, including humans. Existentialism affirms that people's essence is their power to continually redefine themselves through the choices they make. Next, we discuss how existentialism opposes the split between subject and object. According to Kierkegaard, people are more than mere cogs in the machinery of an industrialized society. Humans are both subjective and objective, and must search for truth by living active and authentic lives. Another common element we can find in existentialism is that people search for some meaning in their lives. We search for the most important questions concerning our being or existence. Who am I? Is life worth living? Does it have a meaning? How can I realize my humanity? The next common element is the belief that each of us is responsible for who we are and what we become. We cannot blame parents, teachers, employers, God, or circumstances. We can choose to become what we can be. It is always our choice. To add as the last note, existentialism is anti-theoretical. For existentialists, theories further dehumanize people and render them as objects. Authentic experience takes precedence over artificial explanations. Now, we go to the two basic concepts of existentialism, being in the world and non-being. First, what does being in the world mean? Being in the world means that we exist in a world that can be best understood from our own perspective. It originated from the German word Dasein, which means to exist in the world. It implies awareness of self as a living, emerging being. People experience anxiety and despair because they have no sense of Dasein, no unity of self and the world. Alienation is the illness of our time, and it manifests itself in three areas: separation from nature, lack of meaningful relationships, and alienation from one's authentic self. On the other hand, healthy people live in Umwelt, Mitwelt, and Eigenwelt simultaneously. They adapt to the natural world, to other humans, and have keen awareness of self. Next, we discuss non-being. Our awareness of life, or in this case, being, leads to the dread of not being or non-being or nothingness. Death is the most obvious avenue of non-being, but there are other forms too. Life becomes more vital, more meaningful when we confront the possibility of our death. Non-being, when not confronted courageously, can result to blind conformity to society, addictions, and other compulsive behaviors, and dimming our self-awareness. Non-being, when confronted courageously, makes us deliberate in a way that what we do each hour is an absolute quality. We realize that we cannot separate non-being from being, and because of this realization, life becomes more vital and more meaningful. After knowing the foundations of existentialism, let us now meet Rollo Rees-May. Rollo Rees-May has been called the father of American existential psychology. Rollo May was the foremost spokesperson of existentialism in the US for nearly 50 years. He was born on April 21, 1909 and died on October 22, 1994. He was a psychotherapist and his approach was based on clinical experience. May was not particularly close to any of his parents, and he found solitude spending time on the shores of St. Clair River, to which he said he learned more from than from the school he attended. May became friends with a renowned existential theologian and philosopher, Paul Tillich, who remained his friend for 30 years. One of the life-changing events in his life is when he suffered from tuberculosis, where he learned to listen to his body and discovered that healing is an active, and not a passive process. May wrote many books, such as The Meaning of Anxiety, Man's Search for Himself, Love and Will, and Power and Innocence, among others. Let's now take a look at May's main concepts of anxiety, guilt, intentionality, care, love and will, freedom and destiny, the power of myth, psychopathology, and psychotherapy. May claimed that human behavior is motivated by an underlying sense of dread and anxiety. Man experiences anxiety when they are aware of the possibility that he can become nothing. This confrontation with anxiety can lead to stagnation and decay, but can also result in growth and change. He identified two kinds of anxiety: normal and neurotic anxiety. Normal anxiety is experienced by everyone. As people grow, their values change, and with each step, they experience normal anxiety. Normal anxiety, per May, is that which is proportionate to the threat, does not involve repression, and can be confronted constructively on a conscious level. According to May, normal anxiety is the anxiety of our day-to-day existence, the anxiety that goes with our love for other people, and this is appropriate to the situation. We are anxious about the atom bomb, about war, losing love, pollution, and these sort of problems. Neurotic anxiety, on the other hand, is a reaction which is disproportionate to the threat, involves repression and other forms of intrapsychic conflict, and is managed by various kinds of blocking off activity and awareness. Neurotic anxiety is handled in a self-defeating manner, and an example of this is when a person has anxiety that stems from inner psychological patterns that may be brought about by childhood experience, thus making the coping response more difficult. May also discussed guilt in relation to anxiety. Anxiety arises when people are faced with the problem of fulfilling their potential. On the other hand, guilt arises when 1. People deny their own potentials, 2. Fail to accurately perceive the needs of others, or 3. Experience separation from the natural world. May also talked about intentionality, which is the underlying structure upon which a choice is made. Without intentionality, people could neither choose nor act on their choice. Action implies intentionality, just as intentionality implies action. The two are inseparable. To illustrate intentionality, May identified a situation where a man or the subject sits on his desk observing a piece of paper or the object. The man can write on the paper, fold it into an airplane, or sketch a picture on it. In all three instances, the subject and the object are the same, but the man's actions depend on his intentions and on the meaning he gives to the experience. That meaning is a function of both himself and his environment. May also discussed the concepts of care, love, and will. According to May, care is a state in which something does matter. It is not the same as love, but it is the source of love, because to love means to care. Will is the capacity to organize oneself so that movement in a certain direction or goal may take place. May defined love as a delight in the presence of the other person. According to May, there are 4 kinds of love: sex, eros, philia, and agape. May defined sex as a basic form of love and is a biological function that seeks satisfaction through the release of sexual tension. Eros, on the other hand, is a higher form of love that seeks an enduring union with a loved one. Philia is non-sexual friendship with another person, while the highest form of love, agape, is altruistic and seeks nothing. May stated that our task is to unite love and will. Both love and will mean reaching out toward another person, and both involve care. Both also necessitate choice, imply action, and require responsibility. A blend of the 4 forms of love requires self-assertion and an affirmation of the other person. It also requires an assertion of one's freedom and confrontation with one's destiny. Another concept that May discussed is freedom and destiny. According to May, destiny is the design of the universe speaking through the design of each one of us. Within the boundaries of our destiny, we have the power to choose, and this power allows us to confront and challenge our destiny. There are 2 forms of freedom, according to May. First is existential freedom, which he defined as the freedom of action or the freedom of doing. It is the freedom to move about and to pursue tangible goals. The second form of freedom is the freedom of being, to think, to plan, and to hope, which he called essential freedom. The next concept May defined is the power of myth. According to May, myths are stories that unite a society. It is comparable to Carl Jung's collective unconscious, in that myths are archetypal patterns in the human experience. May believed that the lack of belief in myths result to people turning to religious cults, addiction, and popular culture in a vain effort to find meaning in their lives. The second to the last concept we will discuss is how May looked at psychopathology. For May, apathy and emptiness are the malaise of modern times, not guilt and anxiety. When people deny their destiny, they lose their purpose for being. They become directionless. May saw psychopathology as a lack of communication, the inability to know others and to share oneself with them. Psychologically disturbed people deny their destiny and thus lose their freedom. The last concept in this presentation is psychotherapy. May rejected the idea that psychotherapy should reduce anxiety and guilt. Instead, he suggested that psychotherapy should make people more human, that is to help them expand their consciousness so that they will be in a better position to make choices. For May, psychotherapy is to set people free. There is no set techniques, but May offers the notion of therapy as a human encounter. That concludes my presentation about Rollo May, and I would like to leave you with this quote: "Death is the one fact of my life which is not relative but absolute, and my awareness of this gives my existence and what I do each hour an absolute quality." I hope you enjoyed that presentation. This is Amechachura-Del Rosario for PY102, Theories of Personality. Have a great day ahead.